Dave Chappelle is once again at the center of global controversy. This time, it's not because of an edgy Netflix special or a late-night comedy club appearance in the United States, but because of something he said halfway across the world, in Saudi Arabia. During a performance at the Riyadh Comedy Festival, Chappelle looked out at the crowd and delivered a line that immediately set the internet on fire. He said, quote, "It's easier to talk here than it is in America." That one sentence has been enough to spark headlines around the world, fuel debates on free speech, and reignite arguments over whether comedy should ever bow to political or cultural pressure. To some, it was a clever jab at cancel culture in the United States. To others, it was tone deaf, especially considering Saudi Arabia's well-documented human rights issues and restrictions on freedom of expression. But like almost everything Dave Chappelle says these days, it wasn't just a throwaway joke. It was a statement, and one that deserves to be unpacked carefully. So what exactly happened? Why is this festival so controversial? And what does Chappelle's comment really mean in the larger conversation about free speech, cancel culture, and the role of comedy in a world that seems more polarized than ever? First, let's set the stage. Saudi Arabia, for decades, was not known as a hub for international comedy. In fact, live entertainment in general was extremely limited, with cinemas banned for more than 35 years. But in recent years, under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's Vision 2030 plan, the country has been undergoing massive cultural shifts. Concerts, sporting events, and, yes, comedy festivals are suddenly part of the national landscape. It's a huge rebranding effort, a way for Saudi Arabia to show the world it can be modern, entertaining, and globally relevant. The Riyadh Comedy Festival is part of this broader push. Organizers invited major international comedians, hoping to put the kingdom on the map as a place where stand-up comedy can thrive. But right from the beginning, the event drew criticism. Some comedians, like David Cross, publicly pulled out of the festival, citing concerns about Saudi Arabia's human rights record. Activists accused the government of sports washing or culture washing, using entertainment to distract from crackdowns on dissent, restrictions on women's rights, and the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. But then there was Dave Chappelle. Known for his fearless, often controversial humor, Chappelle has made a career out of saying the unsayable. He's been criticized, protested, even canceled, depending on who you ask, for jokes about race, gender, and politics. His response has always been the same. Comedians should be free to say what they want, and the audience should be free to laugh or not. So when he took the stage in Riyadh, people expected him to push boundaries. What they didn't expect was for him to look around, smile, and say it felt easier to speak freely in Saudi Arabia than back home in the United States. Now, at first, this sounds shocking. How could anyone say they feel freer to speak in Saudi Arabia, a country ranked among the lowest in the world for press freedom? But if you know Chappelle's style, you realize this was more than likely a jab at what he sees as America's toxic climate around speech. In the U.S., he's faced walkouts at Netflix, student protests at Duke Ellington School of the Arts, and endless waves of social media outrage. From his perspective, it's not the government restricting his words, but rather the culture itself. The idea that you can lose your career or reputation because of a joke, that's what he's pointing to when he talks about America being harder to speak in. Of course, critics were quick to point out the irony. In Saudi Arabia, criticism of the government can land you in prison. Women's rights activists and journalists have faced imprisonment, torture, and worse. So for Chappelle to praise the kingdom's openness while mocking America's cancel culture feels, to many, like ignoring the elephant in the room. It's one thing to critique cancel culture in the U.S., it's another to suggest that authoritarian systems are somehow more hospitable to free expression. But Chappelle thrives on that kind of tension. He wants the audience, and by extension the public, to wrestle with uncomfortable truths. His joke in Riyadh wasn't just about Saudi Arabia versus America. It was about what freedom of speech really means. Is it simply about government laws, or is it also about social acceptance? Is it more dangerous to risk jail for criticizing your leaders, or to risk losing your platform and income for telling an unpopular joke? Those are two very different kinds of pressure, and Chappelle is daring us to compare them. Reactions have been mixed, as you might imagine. His fans see it as another example of Chappelle's brilliance, taking a global stage and turning the mirror back on America's culture wars. They argue he's right, that comedians are suffocating under the weight of political correctness, and that even in countries with tighter laws, there's less of a mob mentality around comedy. His critics, however, argue the opposite. They see it as reckless, even dangerous, to downplay the struggles of people in Saudi Arabia who truly have no voice. By making the joke in Riyadh, they argue Chappelle inadvertently gave cover to the very system that silences dissent. But let's zoom out for a moment. Chappelle's comments didn't happen in a vacuum. They're part of a much larger debate about comedy's role in society today. Comedy has always been about pushing boundaries. From Richard Pryor to George Carlin to Lenny Bruce, the great comedians made their names by saying things that others were afraid to say. But in the age of social media, the stakes are higher. A joke that used to land in a smoky club now gets clipped, uploaded, and dissected by millions within hours. The comedian loses control of the context, and suddenly a punchline becomes a scandal. That's the environment Chappelle is reacting to, and whether you agree with him or not, it's undeniable that the way we consume comedy has changed. Jokes don't stay in the room anymore. They become global instantly. And for a comedian like Chappelle, who has built his identity around testing the limits, that shift can feel suffocating. Now, let's talk about Saudi Arabia's side of this equation. For the kingdom, hosting Chappelle and other big names is about image. It's about telling the world, look at us. We're modern, we're fun, we're open to debate. But critics say it's a carefully managed illusion. The government wants the laughter, the headlines, the Instagram clips, but only within a controlled environment. They want to be seen as open without actually loosening the reins of power. So when Chappelle says it's easier to talk there, it plays into that narrative, whether he intended it or not. And yet there's another layer. For the Saudi audience in the room, that moment was electric. Imagine sitting in Riyadh, watching one of the most famous comedians and hearing him say it feels easier to speak there than in the United States. Whether or not it's literally true, it's a kind of validation, a moment of pride. Comedy can do that. It can give people a sense of recognition, even if it's wrapped in irony. So where does this leave us? Well, like so many of Chappelle's performances, it leaves us unsettled. He's not offering easy answers. He's throwing gasoline on the fire and watching the sparks fly. That's his role, and in many ways, it's why he's still one of the most talked about comedians in the world. But the larger conversation is bigger than Dave Chappelle. It's about what we value in speech and art. Should comedians be held accountable for every word, or should we accept that part of comedy is testing boundaries, even if it offends? Can we critique cancel culture in America without downplaying genuine repression abroad? And when global stars like Chappelle perform in countries with authoritarian systems, are they helping open doors, or are they legitimizing regimes? These are not easy questions, and maybe that's the point. Chappelle doesn't want us to walk away with a neat conclusion. He wants us to feel the discomfort. He wants us to laugh, wince, argue, and think. In Riyadh, he managed to do all of that with just one line. At the end of the day, whether you love him or hate him, Dave Chappelle has once again succeeded in what he does best, forcing us to confront the contradictions in our world. Comedy, after all, is not just about punchlines, it's about truth, or at least the uncomfortable pursuit of it. So the next time you hear that quote, "It's easier to talk here than it is in America," ask yourself what he really meant. Was it a dig at cancel culture, a satire of Saudi Arabia's restrictions, or just another Chappelle mic drop moment designed to stir the pot? The answer may be all of the above, and that's why we're still talking about it. And with that, we'll leave it up to you. Do you think Chappelle was right that cancel culture makes it harder to speak in America than in Saudi Arabia? Or do you see it as a reckless joke that ignored deeper truths? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because the debate over comedy and free speech is far from over.